Before we start the course, I would like to ask you how we course. And our speaker for today is Dr. Bukan from session. We will have maximum.
Okay. So thank you, Dana. So am I audible? Clear?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'd like to share my screen. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen over here? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dana. Okay, then I would like to share my, the title today, Research Methodology. So thank you, AIBPM. Good morning, everyone. And then also the fellow attendees. So today it's my honor to share with you research methodology, that the method that we use during research. So first of all, let's us understand what is research. So it's actually organized. That means step by step. Then systematic. That means we have not only step by step, but we have reasons why we are doing this first. Like for example, we will identify problem statement, then followed by what we will do from the literature review to identify the variables. Then after that, we will continue to come out with the research framework, and then data collection, analysis, and finally, we will write the report. So it's actually very systematic and critical. Critical, that means we don't just look at the surface. We will have a depth investigation, and we have to be objective. That means we need to be fair throughout the process of research, as well as scientific investigation, which means whatever that we have come to conclusion, or whatever that we have reported, it has to be supported by the evidences. So usually if your research is more on quantitative, then usually it's supported by statistics. If it is more on qualitative, then usually it will be supported by different experts, which they are good in that area. So into a specific problem, so that we can find an answer to the solution. So basically, research is step by step, and we will look into it in depth, need to be fair and supported by evidence, so as to solve a research problem. So we need to find a solutions to the problem. So when we talk about doing research in order to solve the problem, then we have two types of reasoning. So reasoning as in like how do we come to the conclusion? So conclusion as in, okay, so what kind of solutions can be used in order to solve the problem? So we could have two types of reasoning. One is called inductive, one is called deductive. So I think we have come to this stage. This is not really strange to us. So inductive is more to applicable in qualitative, deductive is more applicable to quantitative, but we will look into it. So what is induction? So induction is the process that you arrive at the conclusion. Most important thing is based on observation. So observation as in what we have seen throughout the pattern. So from time to time. So for example, induction is a process where we observe the detail of certain phenomena, and based on the evidences that we have collected, then we arrive at a conclusion. So I like to tell my students, like let's say, okay, when they come to the college, so after they come after 9 a.m. So there's no more car park available in the college. So this thing, they keep observing, keep happening like from years to years. So maybe after 3 years, 4 years, they are very certain after 9 a.m. So they come to a conclusion, no more car park already. But that doesn't happen yet. But why they are so sure? Because they make a conclusion based on observation. So observation in the past. So that's why they come to a conclusion. So we build theory from the data we collected, or we will say that we come to a conclusion to become a theory based on what we have observed, based on what we have observed. That is called induction. So for every time that we observe, we actually are adding up based on our experiences. So induce means we add up what we have seen so far. So the more you see, the better it is. So that means it keep adding up our experience. So inductive research begins with the process. We studying specific data, like the one that I give example, we keep looking at the car park after 9 a.m. So every time after 9 a.m, no more car park. So this will do develop. Develop means induce, that you will come out a theory to account for the data. So for example that I give here is throughout my life, every crowd I come across is black in color. So when we look at the crowd, no matter which country is that, it will be in black in color. So every time you see, since the day that you understand the world until today, all crowds are black in color. Therefore, we induce that all crowds are black in color. So something that you keep seeing it from time to time, from years to years. So finally, you can come out a conclusion because that is based on your observation. So the power of inductive reasoning does not lie in its ability to prove, or we cannot prove. Okay, it cannot be used like, for example, how can we prove that every crowd is in black in color? Black, everyone understand it, but we cannot prove this is black, this is not white. Okay, and inductive reasoning is valuable because allow us to form ideas. So basically is we can form our own idea based on what we observe in the past, and it keep happening until it become a frequent phenomena that we can see. So on the other hand, deduction means what? Deduction means we reduce. Reduce what? We will use a theory to develop a hypothesis. So that's why this one is more to quantitative, more to quantitative. So before we start a research in quantitative, we will identify what theory to be used in the framework. Then based on the framework, we will develop hypothesis. So reduce means from a very general theory, it will be reduced to be a specific hypothesis. So that's why hypothesis is unique of a general theory. So theory can be general, but you need to apply into your specific research that is called deduction. So of course, you need to find evidence to support the hypothesis, whether they are significant or they are not significant. So if they are significant, that means you support the hypothesis. But if they are not significant, that means we don't support the hypothesis that we formed earlier. So deduction is the process by which we arrive at conclusion from a fact, okay, from a fact. So basically, we will use a fact to check whether the hypothesis that we form is in line or not. So if it is in line, that means we support the hypothesis. If it is not, that means in that particular context, so that is a different saying. So in that way, we need to further investigate why it is actually not the same. So a type of research in which specific expectation is deduced from general theory. So we will test with data. So remember, for hypothesis, we will, hypothesis is a very specific context in our research. So our specific expectation actually comes from a general theory. The theory usually general, then we will make it into specific hypothesis. Then after we make it to hypothesis, what we should do? We should test it with the data we collected. So most of us in our Nusantara project, we will collect data. So based on the data, we will check whether the hypothesis that we set is true or not true in our context. So with that, if it is true, then we strengthen the theory we use. But if it is not true, that means we weaken the theory that we use. That means it might not be applicable in our context. It is not to say that the theory is wrong, but maybe it is not really that applicable in our research context. So a deductive researcher state his or her expectation in advance. Then after that, you will design a test to test it. So the expectation over here, we can understand it as hypothesis. Hypothesis. So basically, we will state our hypothesis earlier. So it can be based on theory, it can be based on the literature that we review. So based on, after we have set up the hypothesis, then we will collect data and we will run analysis to test whether it is supporting our earlier expectation, or we name it as hypothesis, or it is actually go against it. So that is called deduction. So basically, deduction is you have the generalizations of theory, make it into specific hypothesis. Okay, example, let's say a theory say that punishment will reduce, okay, will reduce the propensity to commit crime. So it can be applicable in any context. It can be applicable in spouse, it can be applicable into community, it can be applicable in terms of education. But if let's say now I would like to conduct a research on spouse abusers, so how am I going to make it specific? That this is the example. Spouse abusers who are arrested and punished are less likely to repeat abuse. So we put it in our context already. So this is called reduce it from generalization, we reduce to specific hypothesis. So another example, extrinsic rewards such as money will not increase motivation at work. So this is very general. So extrinsic reward can be anything. So let us make it into more specific. Rise in salary will not increase employee motivation. So this make it into very specific. So we are testing on the variable of salary. But of course, extrinsic reward, we have a lot. Not only salary, we still have other terms of extrinsic reward. So this is only one of the example. So basically, deduction is we are using a theory to generalize it, okay, to be a specific hypothesis in our research context. All right, so let me make a summary again. So induction, okay, induction over here basically is we use observation, okay, observation based on what we see, and we go to conclusion. Then for deduction we don't observe, we use theory. Based on the theory, then we will make it specific into hypothesis. So after hypothesis, we will come to conclusion, whether we support or whether we don't support. So this one start with observation, this one start with theory. So that's two different things. And this is more on qualitative approach. Then this is more on quantitative approach for deductive. Okay, so this is the fundamental things that we need to know when we are conducting a research. So we need to state this in our articles before we go for, next week we need to submit, right? So before we go for that, in our chapter 3, we need to specify, are you using induction or are you using deduction? And you need to justify, all right? So, and also in Nusantara Project, we did our own research. But so what type of research is that? So we have two types. One is applied research, one is basic research. So applied research, basically, we would like to solve current problem in a very timely solution. That means in a very fast mode, or we want to solve a problem. But if it is basic one usually is you want to generate knowledge, okay, to understand, comprehend means understand how the problem occur can be solved. So we are more to basic lah, okay, because based on what we have like customer satisfactions or purchase intentions, it's not really a very urgent problem, but we try to have a body of knowledge. But of course, it can be used to address certain problem. But of course, it's not in timely solution. Otherwise, timely solution means if you really come up with a solution and you need to propose to the company, and they will use it as fast as possible to address the very urgent issues. Otherwise, yeah, we see some problem and we try to solve it based on our research. Okay, so that is to increase our knowledge. All right, so method, talk about method is actually our title today. So there are many widely acceptable methods, a lot of methods that I will share with you today. But remember, there is no best method, or it's very hard to say that, oh, this is the best compared to others. No, but it depends on suitability of the method. So each method has its own advantages as well as disadvantages, but it's all based on how suitable it is. Okay, how suitable it is, especially to fit our research question and research objective. So for example, if today we would like to test on relationship between variable A and variable B, so it will be more on quantitative. So if it is more on quantitative, then it will be good to use questionnaire to collect data for the instrument that we use. But if today we would like to know more, like let's say we would like to know about the culture, we like to know about the phenomena, then it's very limited if you use questionnaire to ask, because we can only get to know things that we ask. But things like that we didn't cover, then we might not know about that. So in that way, it is advisable to use qualitative, because qualitative, it can go with interview, it can go with observations or any way in order to know more, or things that we don't ask but we can observe, or we can get to know about the knowledge. So that's why research is all depends on our objective or our question. From there, we need to determine whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Quanti means relate to numbers, quali relate more on explanation. So based on that, then only we choose the method which are suitable to us rather than best method. There's no best method, whether it's suitable or not suitable only. Okay, so that's a general understanding of method. Okay, so next we would like to go for hypothetical, because based on for example, my own group, so almost all of my group are using quantitative, and I realized that other group as well. So I'll more focus on deductive research process. So if let's say we are using deductive, so what we are going to do? So we will have 7 steps, okay? But before this, we need to understand what is hypothetical deductive method. So one of the most common method to carry out investigation is hypothetical deductive method. So what are they? So obviously we have hypothetical first element, deductive as the second element. Hypothetical means we will use hypothesis. Deductive means like what I explained earlier. Deductive is we will use a theory to make it into hypothesis, and lastly it will go to conclusion. Okay, so it's a combination between these two, but actually they are the same thing. You have a theory, we will use hypothesis. So that's why hypothetical deductive method. So they are always together. So let's look at it separately. What is hypothesis testing? So hypothesis, things that you used to know, HO, HA, or some book called H1, they are the same. So hypothesis is a statement that describes, usually we can test relationship between two variable or more variable. So if you set a hypothesis, you will collect data. Collect data for what? To find evidence, whether they support the hypothesis or they disagree with the hypothesis. That is what we do in hypothesis testing. Now, what about deductive approach? It will start to identify theory hypothesis. That means you want to form a hypothesis, you need to form a theory first. You need to choose a suitable theory. Based on the theory, it will be reduced to hypothesis. Okay, so after you make it to hypothesis, then only again, same, collect data, then to explain whether we support or we don't support our hypothesis. So let me summarize what is hypothetical deductive. Basically is you find a theory, you reduce it into hypothesis in our context, we collect data, and we make it as evidence to support or not supporting the hypothesis. Okay, so it's a process. So like what I mentioned earlier, we have 2 types. One is deduction, one is induction. Deduction, quantitative, induction, qualitative. Okay, so but we will more focus on deduction. So when we make a conclusion from a theory, so you make a conclusion from a theory, then we say deductive. But if you make a conclusion based on observation, observe the phenomena, then we are said to use inductive. Okay, so guys, that is the main difference. Conclusion from theory, deduction. Conclusion from phenomena or observation, we call induction. Okay, so like what I mentioned, deduction is they use theory to explain what we want to know. Induction is we create a theory based on what we observe, So in short, this is repeating what I mentioned earlier. Deduction is, I repeat again, deduction is we come out a conclusion based on the theory. Induction is we come out a conclusion based on observations that we observe on a certain phenomena. All right, so in order to carry out hypothetical deductive, we need to use 7 steps. Okay, these are the common step or method that we use when we do our research, especially during our Nusantara project. Okay, so observation. So through before we do or we pick a title, we need to observe first. So what should we observe? Now you see, through the experience, so we witness or we aware of our phenomena based on the news or article we read every day. For example, nowadays, widespread use of social network. So let's look into it. What is the problem? or consciousness of personal wellness, or people like to, to be healthy or to be rich. So now the consciousness is there. And we have a lot of issues throwing away newborn baby also. Why is that so? Or maybe rising food prices, especially in Malaysia recently. Yeah, all type of foods, all the pricings are rises. And popularity of smartphone and digital tablet, especially in the youngsters. So why is that so? And then indecent of political campaign. So it might happen, in throughout the world. And body tattoo, increasing divorce rates. Yes, this is all the example we use to observe before we pick a title. So we need to do something which is worth to be done, especially if they process any problem, so that we can solve the problem. All right, so based on the observation, we always need to ask ourselves the WH question. For example, who is involved, why is happening, when does this take place, and where does this take place? And also need to ask how. How means how this is actually happening. So when we observe, we need to process first before we fix a title. So what are the WH question? So you need to find out this so that you have a better idea. Otherwise, new throwing baby. So I mean, like newborn throwing baby, then we just pick a title, but you don't really look into it. That is very hard for you, especially when you didn't go through, browse through the literature that you have on hand. So maybe it's not really available. Okay. For example, I have a student that he wants to do the research in terms of electrical car. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic, but the thing is, can he find, related information, especially the literature? Otherwise, yeah, you can still do it, but you need a lot of time because it's not yet explored by the community. So that's why you need to ask all these WH questions, how, then before you proceed. Okay, so what we ask you to happen, or what are the factors? So environment, others, our economics, or our government policy, or maybe it's the family influence. So all this you need to understand whether it comes from us ourselves, our own psychological driven, or it comes from the external, that it has been a trend that everybody would like to follow. So you need to understand all this first. And who are affected? That means the party that are affected, and who are the stakeholder. That means who are the ones should be responsible for this. All right. So when you have a topic, you're aware of a topic, that's not enough. You need to get to know more through WH question, through how. So based on this, you have a thorough idea on the topic. Then only you are confident enough to fix a topic. All right. So after you observe, you want to fix a topic. Before that, you need to gather data, gather information. So once we become interested to know more about a certain topic, we need to have detailed information. So at this stage, our understanding is very superficial. Superficial means shallow. Shallow means you know very little. You don't know much. You have just a general idea, but you do not know much about that. So what you should do, you should carry out literature review. I believe you have done that at this stage. So you should read books, especially articles. Okay, so article, we will tend to use latest by 5 years. There's a reason. If you use 10 years ago, maybe, this is not true anymore. It's not updated anymore. It's not something that we can follow because things can be changed very drastically. So we used to say within 5 years. And there's a common things that we do, like now we are in a Nusantara Project. It's very advisable to refer back what has been published in our AIBPM journals. So we have a lot, okay? In our journal, we can just browse through in AIBPM website. Then 1 year we have twice of Nusantara Project, and we have numbers of papers have been published. And of course, it has been peer reviewed, presented in conference. So things that, is really scientifically supported. So let's read what has been in the past, all right? So especially has been cited or has been published. So we can cite based on what have been done by seniors so that it will be more robust, especially it support our own argument or our own insights. So that will be very good. So we need to read more article, especially during these 5-year times. All right, and other printed materials such as newspaper, online news, things that you can use so that you can find out the historical background or maybe the variable or the certain terms, what are the definition and what has been found in the past, okay, so that you can use it to support your argument. And maybe ongoing debate, that means that is different perspective, or we call paradigm. They have different perspective and is yet to be solved. So that means maybe party A say in that way, maybe party B say in another way. So they are still debating, but it's good for us when it is a debating so that we can try to research on it, then we can take a stand in terms of our context. So this is also something that we can learn of. But you imagine if today you don't go for literature review, you might not know the historical background, you don't know what is the definition, you don't know what is the past finding, or you don't even know what are suspended there. So you might not know how to continue, okay? And also, if you read articles, you will know who are the experts or who are the experts that you can go and learn. For example, if you learn about burnout, then the expert will be Maslach, okay, and also Jackson at year 1981, and they introduced the instrument that has been widely used, like almost I don't know how many years already. So a lot of people still use it, Maslach burnout inventory, or we call it as MBI. But if you do not read, you don't even know where you should start. So that is very important to start from literature review. Okay. So what are we reading? What are their ideas? What are their opinion? What are their perspective insight? Okay. So this is very important. So we need to gather the data or information through books, article, or printed material. Then when we do literature review, that means we start to read the articles or that, we learn more about theory. They will usually state what are the underlying theories that they use. Okay, so this theory will describe the concept. Concept, you can understand it as variables. Okay, so they will describe the variable and how these variables are related to each other. Okay, how they are related to each other. So you don't only know what is their opinion, you can also know what theories that they use. Okay, and based on the theory, they will explain how these variables are related, or maybe they are related in this way or in another way. So you get more idea before you proceed for writing. So that's very important to read through. So our literature review will find a twist. Twist, that means different perspective, different angle. So maybe, let's say Western researcher look at this way, but Asian researcher, they look at another way. That is very interesting. So if you can combine it, synthesize it, and dissimulate it, then it becomes something worth to be read. Okay, worth to be read. So if you can find a twist that will be very meaningful in your research, and define the scope, or define the scope means what is relevant to your research and what is not. So usually when we do research, and we as a supervisor, we used to ask you a few questions. Like, let's say we would like to do, let's say, stress among students. So we will ask you what are the scope. So are you focusing on kindy students, or are you focusing on a primary school or secondary school student, or are you focusing on university students? So that different contexts, they have different factors affecting them. So if you can narrow down, then that will be the best. Okay, so state the scope. So what is relevant and what is not relevant. So when you do the literature research, if you're focusing on university student, so all other type of student, you can take out temporarily first. Don't waste your time to read something not relevant. So you just focus so that you have a better idea on what you need to proceed next. All right, so after you read through, you're aware of the title, you read through, and you get to know your topic very well. Okay, then now you need to formulate. Maybe you come across 20 articles, and different articles, they use different theory. But at this stage, you need to decide which theory to be used already. Which theory to use. Theory for what? To answer your research question. So you think which one is the best to be used. So all this theory actually come from the past finding, okay, and they're based on paradigm. Paradigm means perspective, okay, our perspective, how we look at the thing. So different theory, they have different perspective. So that is no wrong or right, but that is whether suitable to your context or not. So you need to decide, okay? So for example, motivation, they have a lot of theory. Okay, motivation theory based on different perspective. So some motivation theory, they stress on internal drive, from inside a person, for example, psychologically. Whereas certain theory, they based on come from external, from parents, from friends, artists, football players, and all that. So you see, just a motivation theory, it has internal, it has external. But that is no wrong or right, but you need to choose which one is more suitable to your current research context. So that's very important. So once you choose what is suitable for you, it is okay to modify slightly. Okay, modify so that you can use in terms of your research. Okay, but anyhow, you're going to reduce it because theory is very general. So later on, you need to form hypothesis. Then you need to reduce from a very general into very specific context in terms of your research. All right, so after you choose a theory, you already form a theory and you can understand the variable, how they affect each other, then you need to form the hypothesis already. Okay, so from the theory, they say that A is affecting B. This is in a very general. So you need to formulate the hypothesis so that it becomes specific. Specific means what? Specific in terms of your context. Okay, so hypothesis describe usually relationship. For example, social learning theory say that significant other. This is very general. Who are the others? Influence, intention. Intention can be any intention, isn't it? So how are we going to make it very specific? Let's say, so we are doing why people smoke. So how are we going to do that? Friends, that means significant others. Friend who smoke influence a person's intention to smoke. So this intention refer to this intention to smoke. So you put this theory into your context. There you go. Your significant other is the friends. The intention is the intentions to smoke. So you put it in a very specific context. So this is why we cannot and never test a theory because it is too general. Very hard. Like there's no questionnaire or that when you don't specify who are the others, you can't refer, isn't it? When you don't specify what kind of intention, you can't go and collect data. So that's why we cannot and we never test the theory, but we will make it into hypothesis so that we can test. Why? Because hypothesis is very specific and then we can test from the hypothesis. All right, so this is the example. So this is the theory, very general. You need to make it into very specific in your context so that you can collect data based on what you have narrowed down. So hypothesis, we have three types. Okay, hypothesis, we have three types. So the first type is called if-then. So this one is quite simple. If a person has more than one credit card, then that person will be, will almost overspend. That is the if-then format. Then the second one is the directional format. The longer a person works for an organization, the more loyal the person will be. So like the more, the better, or the less, the worse. So these are the direction. Okay, but these are the common usually we use. Now an alternate hypothesis. So now that means HO, alternate that means H1. So for HO, we always focus on no. Okay, no. Okay, there is no relationship between your variable, this is your variable, hours trained, and confident in doing work. So we call variable A, variable B. So usually HO or we call H now, we always focus on no. We always focus on no. Okay, between hours trained and confident in doing work. So in alternate or we call H1, certain book call HA, they are the same. So if there's a no, it need to be opposite. There is a relationship between hours trained and confident in doing work. So basically, you just copy paste. But this one is a no. This one is a. Don't put it another way around. Okay. HO always no. H1 always a. That is the format that we use. Okay. So in your write up for your article in chapter 2, literature review, you need to state. Usually, we will state the alternate one. Okay, we will state the alternate one. So whether there is a positive or it can be. You can specify whether it's a positive relationship or whether it is negative relationship. So you state there so that the readers in future who read your article, they understand what is your focus, what you would like to test. All right. So we will use more on the third one now and alternate hypothesis. So once you form the hypothesis, of course, we need to test the hypothesis, isn't it? So how are we going to test? We will collect data to test. Okay, so I believe at this stage, most of the groups or team in Nusantara Project has finished collecting the data. So data collected are those measuring the variables that make up the hypothesis. For example, remember the smoking one that we use? So we may collect the data, how often or how many cigarettes a person smoked in one day, so that we measure smoking. So you need to focus on what you want to measure and you ask that question to measure. All right. So there are many ways to collect data. Yeah. So how we collect data depend on the nature of the question and the paradigm. That means our perspective in terms to understand the reality. Now, so guys, data can be collected in another way, a lot of ways. So it can be through questionnaire, it can be through interview, it can be through observation. Again, there's no wrong or right, but it's all whether it's suitable to your question or not. So like what I mentioned earlier, if we are interested to test on relationship, then it's better for you to collect through questionnaire, okay, through questionnaire. But if you like to know more about a culture, then that will be good in terms of interview. So no wrong or no right, but that is only whether it is a suitable or not. So whether it is suitable or not, then we use that method. So you need to see the logical, or you can study what has been done by the past researchers. Then you can actually adopt the method that they use because they have done it and they came out the finding and they published the paper. That means they have gone through this and it works. So maybe you can adopt the method that they use. Okay, so that is the scientific data collection. So like what I mentioned earlier, we have observation. So observation, we have unobtrusive or participative. Okay, so unobtrusive, basically it means the respondent are not aware that you are observing them, or that means you can do it through CCTV. So the people around, they do not know that you are actually observing them. So you don't disturb them. So it's called unobtrusive. Participative means, yeah, they know that you are standing there. They know that you are using camera to film, the videotape, everything. So they are aware. So we call participative. So when observing unobtrusively, that means that they do not aware. We hope that what we observe, they are unaware or undisturbed by our presence. That means they can be who they are, or they can act naturally because they do not know that we are actually observing them. So, but if you are doing participative, that means they know that you are doing the observation. So we participate in action. That means you are there to observe. Okay. So observation, we have two types. The first type is unobtrusive. That means they are not aware that we are observing them. Participative means usually we'll be there and they aware that we are actually observing them. So observation, we have two types. Then the second type, I think most of the team in Nusantara Project we will use questionnaire. Especially now we have Google Form. That is very, very easy. Okay, that we can actually just distribute the link and they can answer at their own convenience. The third one is interview. Interview, we got two types. We got focus group, we got expert interview. So focus group, usually we will have like maybe 8 to 10 people, including the moderator. Then we will sit down together in a circle. Then these 10 people usually heterogeneous. That means they are not from the same background. Maybe their ages are different. Then we will sit down, no, different background, different perspective, different ages also, different generation, we have different perspective. So in that case, we get to know more ideas, okay, on the certain things that we discuss. So that's called focus group. Expert interview means we interview usually one by one to the expert so that we get to know more about the opinion very professionally because it's from the expert. So from a focus group, that is very on ground. That means we will talk to the customers, we will talk to the potential one so that we get to know the issue better. Expert, we get to know the issue more professionally because it's from the expert. So both also has its own function. One is direct from customer, one is direct from expert. And another way of collecting data is called artifact. Artifact means things that has been used and left by people we are studying. So let's say now we would like to study a very what we call a successful historian, okay, a person that we look up to. So we go and study what things that they have used and left over so that we get to understand more about the person. Or you want to study about a decade, or want to study about some century ago. So how they react, how they responded, all this. Then we study what they have used, what they have written in the past, so that we get to know more about them. And last one is document analysis. So a document means, a document that they, maybe full of words, maybe full of numbers that they put it inside a paper or what. So we're going to study, analyze whatever that they have written. It can be words, it can be number, it can be diagram, so that we get to know more about that century people. Then we can, through their expression, through whatever that they share with us, then we get to know more about them. Okay, so this is, of course, we have more than this 5 ways. Then this is the main 5 that we will focus on. So after you collect the data, you can't just leave it there. You need to analyze it. So once we have collected the data, we need to run some analysis. Okay, why we need to run analysis? To say that whether that is true in the hypothesis. That means whether we support or whether we don't support the hypothesis. Okay, so if it is quantitative, you need to use some statistical test. Like we can use chi-square. So chi-square usually is a non-parametric test on different variable, or we can use t-test, or t-test usually is a parametric test. So t-test, we got a few types. All right, you can have a dependent t, we have an independent t. So we want to know the differences among 2 groups. Or you can use ANOVA. So ANOVA is you would like to know the differences more than 2 groups. Or you can use linear regression. That means you have a few variables which affect the dependent variables. Okay, so these are the things that we use. And then the type of test that we carry out depend on the data that we collect. So what test to be used depends on what data that you ask. Okay, so for example, data we got 4 types. Nominal means category. No number one, just category, male, female, like that, like our demographic. Ordinal we got ranking. Ranking like, okay, which one you like the most, followed by the least. Interval, you got number already. Okay, it's just that 0 does not mean 0, or 0 does not mean 0. What does that mean? For example, temperature. When you hit 0, that does not mean that there's no temperature. There's still temperature. It's just a freezing point. So 0 itself, it does not mean absent. 0 itself, it just means another indicator, just a number. That's called interval. Ratio, basically, number with meaningful 0. Meaningful 0. That means 0 means 0. 0 means 0. Okay, so you have to see what type of data that you have collected. So nominal, usually demographic. Ordinal, usually Likert scale. Just example lah. Then interval and a ratio based on the number that they can stick. So different type of data that you collect, then you will tend to use different tests. It depends. So of course, it needs you to have a good statistical knowledge. Otherwise, you use the wrong test, then your result might not be convincing. Okay, so for example, if you use interval and ratio, that means you got numbers already. Then you can use, you can do linear regression, or you can do Pearson correlation. So if you have nominal, if you have ordinal, and you want to do correlation, you cannot use Pearson. Okay, in that case, you need to use Spearman. Spearman is actually for qualitative, or nominal or ordinal. So Spearman, it has certain steps to follow also. So that's why you need to know what type of data you would like to test, and based on the data, you choose the right test to use. Okay. So after we have run the data, of course you have a results. So the result, you need to make a conclusion. So you need to make sense of the result from the data that you collect. So we need to offer an explanation based on the result. Why your hypotheses are accepted or rejected. Why support, why don't support. So all the logical explanation cannot be simple, simply by your opinion. It has to be supported. It has been supported by evidence, so that your discussion will be more stronger. Okay, so that people know that you explain it. It's not based on your own thinking. You explain it based on the past research. So the evidence, that means whatever you get from your data analysis, the evidence that we have either strengthen or weaken the theory. Like what I mentioned earlier, if you support the hypothesis, that means you support the theory. That means you strengthen. But if you weaken the theory, that means you don't support the theory. So all the data that you collected, you analyze, at the end of the day, you can know the results. So if the result says to support the hypothesis, then you are strengthening. But if the result says that it is actually disagree with the hypothesis, you are weakening the theory. Okay, weakening the theory. But that doesn't mean the theory is wrong. Maybe it's just not applicable to your context. So remember, statistical analysis will not explain to us why it happened in this way. Will not have the result. They will not tell you why hypothesis is accepted, why hypothesis is not accepted, or they will not tell you. But we as a researcher, we need to make sense of the statistic. So example, you have collected the data, then you are keying the data into SPSS, then you run the analysis. So once you run the analysis, you will usually look at the p-value, isn't it? So if the p-value less than 0.05, that means it is significant. More than 0.05, it is not significant. So if significant, that means we will say that there's a relationship. So when there's a relationship, nobody else explain to you why there is a relationship. So we as a researcher, we need to explain why. Even the answer is a no, we need to explain why it is a no. Okay, no significant relationship. So researcher play the very important role. All right. So this is the summary. We observe what we have. Based on the title that we want to do, we find what is the problem. Based on the problem, we form a framework. That means the variable involved. So from the framework, we can form hypothesis. It depends on how many lines we get in the framework. Then from the hypothesis, then we can start to collect data. But before start to collect data, you need to define this first. What is a variable? What are the instruments used? So after you have this, you design how to conduct the research. So after you design it, you start to collect. You start to analyze. After you get the result, start to give meaning of the result. Then you refine the theory. Refine means you support or you don't support. Then after that, you will continue the circle again, do the next research or observe the same phenomena. Is that so? Based on what you have found. So this is a circle of our research method. Okay, so up to here, you have any question? Let me see. Where is it? Okay. Yeah, if you have any question, you can type in chat box or you can unmute yourself. All right. So next, we will move on to the next part, theoretical framework. Okay. So once we get to know the steps, then we need to form theoretical framework. Oh, that's very important. And hypothesis. So a theoretical framework basically is a conceptual model that how are we making the sense of the relationship between the variables. So basically theoretical framework is a model. So this model will involve the variable that we would like to test. Okay, involve the variable that we would like to test. Okay, thank you, Dr. Gan. Oh, okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Gan. Okay, so theoretical framework is actually a model in order to test the relationship between the variables. So from a theoretical framework, we can form hypotheses. Okay, so that we can test whether the theory is validated or not validated. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me show you. This is an example of theoretical framework. So this, do you have confidence in doing work or not? Okay, so it depends on intelligence, how intelligent you are, or it depends on your qualification. So high level of your qualification or your work experience or your support from boss. So all this, these are the theoretical framework. This is your dependent variable. That means your primary interest. All these are your independent variable. So these are, we call it as factors, factors which affect your dependence. So the circle have to come here. Okay, sorry, the arrow have to come here. Okay, not another way around. So what does that mean? That means intelligence will affect your confidence in doing work. Your qualification will affect your confidence. Your work experience in the past will affect your confidence. Your support from boss affect your confidence. So before you form this hypothesis, you need to get this supported by theory, as well as supported by the literature. That means past review. You cannot simply just put a variable and you're saying that they are the one which affect. No, it has to be supported. That only we can use for testing. So, but what is variable? Variable, that means a concept that can take up different value. Value yang berlainan, that means different value lah. So a variable that they can take up different value. So the value can be different at various times. That means different time for the same object. So for example, 2 years ago and 2 years now, the same person, they can have different value. Of course, because within these 2 years, a lot of things happen. Okay, so it become different value. Or same time, but different object. Like now, same time, and in this room, we have a few people. So we have different scoring for certain tests, all right? So value can be different in 2 ways. One is same individual, but different score at different time. Or same time, different score for different people. So that is called variables because it can contain different values. That is the meaning. So in research, we need to identify variable. Like what I mentioned earlier, you cannot simply put a variable and say that it is part of your framework. You must know, okay? You must identify from your literature, okay? And why the value vary means different. Why they are different, okay? So when we do research, we need to identify the variable, especially your potential respondent will think differently. If everyone think in the same way, there's no need to do research, isn't it? Everyone thinks about it. Like you ask a question, are you a human? So everybody say yes. So there's nothing to explain. But when we do research, because we have different opinion, we have different choices, then we would like to know why is that so. That's why it makes our research to become very valuable. All right. So that's why we want to study the variable which it will have different opinion. Then that will be good. For example, why some people have high job satisfaction while others have low satisfaction in the same company? Certain they are very satisfied with the job, and certain they are very dissatisfied. Why is that so? All right, then we can do research. And also you can ask, why are some students very motivated to get good grade? Oh, they are very, very anxious. They are very, motivated to get a good grade. But some, they don't worry. Even they fail also, they don't worry. Why is that so? Or you can do research. Why are some people take time to compare prices before they buy? Others, they just grab and buy. So this one, we can always picture. They like to say, men, okay, so men, they don't compare price, they just buy. For women, they do compare price. So this can be seen as gender differences. But why is that so? You can do a research and you can contribute in terms of the research field, so we get to understand better the world. Okay, so this is variable. We got 4 types. We got dependent variable, independent variable, moderating, and intervening. We will go one by one. So dependent variable, that means your primary interest. So what is your main interest that you want to do? So basically, it's your problem that you focus with, okay? So what you want to solve with, okay? That is called dependent variable. So your goal as a researcher is to understand and describe your dependent variable, okay? Dependent variable means your primary focus that you would like to solve. So how to understand, how to say that you are understanding? You are able to explain the variability. The variability, again, what is that? It's called differences. So why, like just now, our focus is on job satisfaction. Why we have different job satisfaction? Okay, so when you want to focus on certain variables, that variable will call dependent variable, and your job is to explain why different people have different choices toward the same variables. Then you will do research in order to find out the solution. So why a dependent variable is called dependent? Because it's depend on other variable. Dependent variable always depend on other variable. For example, this is dependent variable. It depends on your intelligence. It depends on your qualification. It depends on your work experience as well as support from boss. So it depends on other factors because it will make the changes on the dependent variables. So why dependent variable is called dependent? Because it depends on the influence of other variable. So it can be from independent variable. It can be from moderating or intervening. All right. So just example, your focus is job satisfaction. So it's a dependent variable. So maybe influence. That means they depend by what? How much salary you get. So this salary can be independent variable. Okay, it can be independent variable, but not necessarily always independent. It can be moderating. It can be intervening. All these are affecting them. Intervening. This one I didn't teach you yet. I will cover later. So in short, what is dependent variable? Your primary interest or your main focus or a problem that you would like to solve. That is called dependent variable. So next, independent variable, what is that? Independent variable is the one that affect dependent variable. They have direct effect in dependent variable. Okay, it can affect in positive way, it can affect in negative way. But what does that mean? Positive, that means they will go up in the same direction or go down in the same direction. Negative means one up, one down, or one down, one up. That means opposite direction. So for example, customer loyalty, you look at the arrow, they're pointing there, that means it affects customer satisfaction. So if a customer is loyal to the product or the company, then they have more satisfaction. So in that case, it is actually a positive way, But if today this is going up, then another, let's say going down, then it becomes negative, different direction. So you need to identify what type of direction they are actually. So when the independent variable is present, the dependent variable also need to present. Otherwise, you got nothing to test, isn't it? So with each unit of increase in the independent variable, so that means one increase. Let's say I increase 1 unit, increase 1 unit of customer loyalty. So there will be there's an increase or decrease in the dependent variable. So when you increase 1 unit, it can increase 1 unit also of customer satisfaction or decrease 1 unit of customer satisfaction. Okay, so this one to be tested, whether they increase or they decrease. But no matter they increase or decrease, this one is the right independent variable because it is able to affect the dependent variable. When independent able to affect dependent variable, then we say that these are the independent variable already. Okay, so what does it mean by affect? That means if you got one unit changes in independent, then there will be changes in dependent. It can be up, it can be down. So when this one increase up, the changes also up, we call positive. But if today the changes is down and they get up a lot, then we call negative. Okay, so it depends on the direction. So in short, what is independent variable? It's the factor which affect your dependent variables. Okay, that is called independent variable. Next, what is moderating? Okay, as you can see over here, so the way of addressing moderating, that is something from the middle. Okay, so this is independent, we just learned, and you were pointing at dependent. So moderating will always in the middle and pointing up to the center of the arrow from IV, we call IV to DV. Okay, IV to DV. So you need to draw it this way, or you can draw it up, then you can go down like that. There's no other way else to address moderating. Moderating always in the middle between IV and DV and pointing to the arrow. But what is moderating variable? Moderating variable, basically, it means that it can change the strength. It can change the strength of the relationship. What does that mean? Let's say customer loyalty high, they tend to satisfy. Okay, so if let's say we talk about Apple product, or we have a few teams we are doing about Apple product. Okay, so if let's say now a customer, they are very loyal to Apple product. So something is wrong with the product, they send for repair or they send for customer service center, they recognize you as their loyalty customer. They recognize you, they serve you very politely, and the responding time is very fast. So in that case, you will be very satisfied. You see, your loyalty to the satisfaction, the relationship becomes strong. Why it becomes strong? When your recognition is higher. They recognize you. That's why you feel happy. You are more satisfied. But if today you memang loyal, all the while you are loyal, but when you want to send for repair, oh, the customer recognition is very bad. You know, they don't really serve you properly, and the responding time, they take really long time. So in that case, you are still satisfied with the product, but not so satisfied. So not so already. That's why maybe sir can draw it like that. Not so satisfied already. So in that case, this relationship become what? They become weak already. So that means this variable is able to change the relationship between IV to DV. Either they make it strong, or either they can make it weak. So IV to DV relationship can be strong, can be weak due to the third variable. And that variable, we call it as moderating variables. Okay, so we need to draw a middle and point up to the IV-DV relationship. So it can change it to be strong, it can change it to be weak, between IV and DV. All right, so example like this, intelligent. Let's say you are very smart today. So of course you have more confidence. But if let's say you smart at 20 plus, okay, you still have confidence. But what if all the while you are intelligent, you are very smart, but you are in your 50 like that, or you have at least 30 years of experience. So you will be even more confident. So you see, this relationship is always there, but it can be strong or it can be weak due to the third variable like this, we call moderating variables. Now, what is intervening? Intervening, the way they draw is, you need to, this is intervening, it's already given here. So you need to draw in this way, and the arrow point to this, and this point to this. Also, it's different with moderating. Moderating is at the middle and pointing down to the IV-DV relationship. But for intervening, no, the entire variable go in the middle. Then IV pointing at behind, and this intervening will point to the dependent variables. But what does that mean? Intervening, certain book they call mediating. It's the same, mediating variable. Okay, so that means influence of other, initially they identify that it has direct relationship to buying behavior. But after you go and test, or after you go and do some research on literature review, all this, then you found out that when people affect you, you don't perform the buying behavior directly. You will have the intention. You will think to buy first. So for example, people tell you, oh, iPhone 13 is very good nowadays, okay? So they influence you. But when you go and buy directly, no. Maybe you have the intention. I want to know more about it. I want to know more in terms of function, in terms of this and that. So you want to know. So once your intention is fulfilled, then only you will perform the behavior. So this is intervening, basically means if you plug in this additional in the middle, then it will have better explanation between IV to DV. This is your IV, this is your DV. If you plug in the middle, the explanation is getting better, then this one we call, yes, mediating, because they exist between IV and DV, or between IV and DV, and this is the way. So what does that mean? When people affect you to buy iPhone, you have the intention first. After you do some survey, then only you perform buying behavior. But without, we don't look at intention, so influence other directly buy. So it's not so, what we call that, it's not so logic, isn't it? So usually if you add in another one, intention to buy in the middle, then you have a better explanation. That is called mediating, or we call intervening variables. So that is something that you need to understand on intervening variable. So guys, theoretical framework is the foundation of the research project. So you must have framework, otherwise you cannot do your research, or you don't even have a direction. So this framework must be logical, developed, and described, and also elaborated, means explain their relationship among the variables. So maybe your first IV and DV, second IV and DV, third IV and DV, or you need to explain why they are related. So can you simply explain like that? No, you need to explain based on citation, based on what has been done in the past, okay? Or based on a theory that you use, so that it support what you say, all right? So usually it is explained for the relationship. Association, you can understand it as relationship, okay? So explain why the relationship is there, okay? And then why this relationship is important? Because later, if they are significant, you will use it to solve your problem. Okay, you can use it to solve a problem. Okay, so this one, theoretical framework, you can identify through processes from interview, observation, or literature review. What does that mean? That means like just now, we have A, B, C affect my DV. Let's say my DV is Z. Okay, A affects Z, B affects Z, C affects Z. This is my framework. Okay, so I need to explain why A affects Z, why B affects Z, why C affects Z. Okay, you need to explain with detail. But how do we know A is affecting, B is affecting? No one tell you in the real world. So you can know from interview process, you can know based on your observation, or you can know, this one you're done based on the literature that you review. Because the literature proposed to you, A is the factor. That's why you will test with A. You don't simply come out a A. You don't simply come out a B. Or basically, you get the idea from the articles or from the, what we call that, interview, or even from observation. Then only you use it. So we do things with reason. Okay, so a good theoretical framework identify and label important variable in the situation that relevant to your problem or relevant to your problem. So you must know what is your problem. So let's say one of my group, okay, in Nusantara Project, they are doing about number of subscriber in telecom broadband has been dropped, or they found the statistic, all that. So that means the internet user is dropping. So they want to identify what are the variables. So they go and read, okay, related articles. And based on that, they know what variable that could possibly be affecting. So they will put that to be tested. So there we go, it become a framework. Okay, it become a framework so that all these variable we want to test whether they are really affecting the what we call the drop of number users of broadband. If they are significant, that means we can control the variable. From there, we can improve the situation or we can address the problem. So the framework logically describe, okay, what they describe interconnection, or you can understand it as relationship. So relationship usually IV to DV, but sometimes moderating also inside, intervening also inside. So IV, that means A affect B. This is called IV, this is called DV. What if I got C affect this relationship? This is called moderating. Oh, I cannot write that. Moderating. But what if I change a little bit? A affect D first, D affect B. So this is called mediating, or we call intervening. Intervening. Okay, so framework, you will usually contain all variables, but as long as you are able to explain the relationship between A to B, or between the moderating or intervening, so you must provide a logical explanation. So based on the framework, then we can form hypothesis like what I mentioned earlier. So hypothesis, basically you want to test the relationship. Okay, relationship. So the relationship actually come, all this relationship that you want to test, it can from a theoretical framework. From a theoretical framework, that means what variable you want to do. So it's inside the framework. So after that, from the framework, you can form hypothesis like this. Okay, never mind, I draw here. A affect B affects, let's say, donkey. B affect donkey. C affect donkey. So how many arrow? That means how many hypotheses? In here we have 3 hypotheses. Okay, so a hypothesis will be expressed in a way that is testable. Testable means you can use it to test. For example, you say no relationship, so we can test yes or no. Okay, but you cannot test something that cannot be tested. For example, we are sad, so how to test? There is no way to test. So hypothesis, you need to make it in such a way that is testable, and it can be falsifiable. What is falsifiable? It can be wrong. Okay, we can assume it can be wrong. Like for example, we say that there's a relationship between A and B. So we will test it. And let's say later we found out, oh, we don't support that. We don't support that. That means this statement is a false statement in our context. So it's all right to be wrong. It's all right to be wrong. Not to say wrong, to make the relationship no sense. That means insignificant. It's okay to make it insignificant. At least you try. Even insignificant also, it can be a result to tell the later researchers that this variable and this variable, they are not related. So in that case, at least you will know better. So this one, I think I will skip because I teach you already. If then, directional, and now alternate. So if that means if A, then B. So directional means the more, the higher, the less, the worse. But we have one called no direction. No direction, they focus on different. Okay, so all these are H1, they didn't put HO for you to see. So there is a difference, okay, between body weight and salary levels. Or there's a difference between gender and our shopping. So that is called non-directional because only different, but we don't know whether it's going up together or going down together. Okay, and this is what we use. What we use in our research is HO and H1. HO, I told you before, always on top and always no. H1 is always there is a relationship. There is a relationship between your A and your B variables. Okay, so when we use null and alternate hypothesis to test hypothesis, Our objective is to find evidence to reject. Oh, remember, when we state our HO, H1, our main focus is to reject our HO. We try to reject HO, okay? But after you run some statistical tests, okay, you run some statistical tests, they will tell you whether you should reject it or not. If you reject the null hypothesis, HO and H1, right? If you reject HO, you will automatically accept H1. What if your result tell you that, oh, it cannot reject HO? Then we will still stick to the result of HO. That means HO is correct in that sense. Okay, so that is now an alternate hypothesis. So before I go to the next part, you have any question? Okay. Thank you, Dana. Okay, thank you, Dr. Gan. You have any question?
No question is
No, okay. All right, thank you. So we will go to the another part. Okay, another part is, okay, now we have framework, we hypothesis, then we would like to construct questionnaire, isn't it? So when we want to construct questionnaire, we must know the skilling. Okay, what type of skill that you want to use. So why we need to apply skilling? Because we want to measure the variable. Even demographic also, we want to measure. So there are two categories to measure variable. We got rating skill, we got ranking skill. So rating skill basically is skill with two or more responses. That means you can have more than two of category for you to choose. Ranking different. Ranking is you are comparing. When you do the choices, you need to compare. So rating is you choose what is good for you. Ranking is you compare what is your preference. So we will go through one by one. Okay, rating skill, we got a lot. We got all this, all right? So I will cover one by one. So what is dichotomous? Dichotomous means you have only two options. Let's say yes or no. You can use that. Then usually this type of result, later on you will use it in a graph, bar chart, histogram, no, not histogram, usually bar chart, okay? So that you can see more people smoke or they don't smoke, or more people they own credit card and they don't. So you have only two options to choose. You don't compare, yeah, but you just choose what is good for you. Category also, so what is your highest qualification level? So you just tick. So let's say I'm in a postgraduate now. So I just tick. Am I comparing? No, but I just take what is my status. Liquor skill, yes, a lot of people are using that. So my work is challenging. So whether I agree or whether I disagree. So this also is not comparing. It just what suits you the most. All right. But liquor skill not necessarily 5 point. It can be 7 point as well. 7 point, it got different in it, but you just pick accordingly. So what is numerical skill? Numerical skill is like, for example, how satisfied are you with the car that you are currently driving? So this is one end, this is another end. You are not comparing with anything. You don't compare, but you just pick what is good for you. Okay, that is relating. So maybe I'm extremely satisfied. So I'll put number one. Okay, but I don't compare with anything. Comparison can be done if you've got more than one subject, but this is only, you know, your own car. So you're not comparing anything. Semantic, what is the personality of your boss? If you think that my boss is quite cold person, so I'll put here. Gloomy and cheerful, I think I'll put here. Self-assured and hesitant. Hesitant means they're not sure. Let's say he or she is very confirmed with the goal, confirmed with the things that he wants to do. So very self-assured, so I'll put here. So that is called differential skill. That means you got two different sides. Okay, then you choose what is best for whatever you want to describe. And itemized rating skill. This is a little bit like a skill lah. So like, for example, I will apply a new job in the next 6 months. So you choose what is the best for you. You don't compare anything, you just choose. So I think, yeah, I will choose 4 because I really look for the job. Just example. So you can use this as your questionnaire construction. Then this one rarely used, but it's something quite good. Let's say when you want to buy a car, what you consider the most, you need to give the marks. Okay, so let's say when I buy a new car, I will focus on the price very much. So let's say I will give 70. So the cost of maintenance, yes, I do, but not so important for me because new car, I give only 5%. Horse and cc, I don't really go elsewhere. So usually within my town area, so I don't really consider that much. I put 5. Seating capacity, yes, let's say I'm from a big family, so it's really important for me, so I put 20. So you need to be careful lah. 20 plus 70, 90 or 100. So cannot already. So you cannot take 20. So maybe you can put let's say